Hi everyone, today I want to share 4 tips that will help you nail your next presentation. Now as leaders, it is extremely important to be able to bring across your ideas and your message convincingly to both your bosses as well as your team, because this will really allow you to implement that change that you and the team really think is important. And one most common way of doing this is through presentations. So it's really critical as leaders to get comfortable and good at giving presentations. So tip number 1, the introduction and conclusion. Now if there's one key point that I would recommend you focus on, it's really on the introduction and conclusion. They're so important for giving a fantastic presentation. The introduction really serves for you as a tool to get your audience excited and engaged about the topic that you're about to present. And the conclusion is a tool for you to convey your key message you want them to remember. So if you get these 2 points right, you're already on a great path for a fantastic presentation. For myself, sometimes I would even memorize the first sentence or 2 sentences for my introduction and memorize the conclusion to really make sure I absolutely nailed those 2 parts. And then the main part of the presentation, I would then just go with the flow. So really spend that time focusing on the introduction and conclusion. So tip number 2, know your audience. Now it's really important to spend a little bit of time getting to know who's going to be sitting in the room and doing some research on what their expectations of the presentation will be. Because it'll definitely be different if you're presenting, for example, to an external customer, to your bosses, or to your team. They will all individually have different expectations which you need to take into consideration when you're preparing your presentation. Some people like to understand the big picture and the strategy and don't really want to know about the details about what you're planning to do. But there are other people that are very much focused on the details. They want to know about every single number, every single action, or every single project. And it's really about getting to know your audience that will be sitting in the room on that day. Because like all of us and like all of our customers, we have certain expectations. If you can meet those expectations or even exceed them during your presentation, then the presentation will come across as a success. So really spend a little bit of time getting to know who will be sitting in that room on that day. Tip number 3, keep your content engaging. So here my tip really is try and keep your slides as neat and tidy as possible. Try and include as many pictures or graphs or videos as you can and keep the text to a minimum. Ideally, maybe just a few bullet points that will guide you when you're presenting that slide. The idea here is really to have a neat and simple slide and you do most of the talking. Most of the content comes from you when you're presenting the slide. The benefit of this is the audience, instead of spending a lot of time trying to understand the slides and understanding what you're trying to say, they're actually spending the time listening to you because there's not that much information on the slide. This makes for a much more engaging presentation. Tip number 4 is practice. Now if you have a big presentation that's really important, I highly recommend practicing at least once. Run through your presentation one time so that you familiarize yourself with your slides, and that will help you really boost that confidence level and also show your audience that you've come prepared. And if you have a bit more time, then really spend that time focusing on the introduction and conclusion that we mentioned in step 1. Really nailing those is key. And also an additional tip, which I've done a lot in the past for really big presentations, is present to somebody as a trial run. It might be a family member or a friend, but somebody you can trust that will give you feedback. Presenting to them at least once will allow you to get feedback on whether the presentation makes sense, whether the flow makes sense, and also on your body language when you present. So really really, I encourage at least practice, do a run through once, and if you can, multiple times, and that will really help you bring everything together and nail that presentation. So in summary, here are the 4 tips that will help you nail your next presentation. Tip number 1, introduction and conclusion. Really focus on these 2 and even consider memorizing the introduction and conclusion so that you nail them during your next presentation. Tip number 2, get to know your audience. Get to understand what their expectations are so that you can exceed them. Tip number 3, keep your content engaging. You don't want the audience to be focusing on the slides the entire time. You really want them to be engaging with you. So keep your slides neat and tidy. And tip number 4 is practice. Try and run through your presentation at least once, but if you have a bit more time, really try and run through it multiple times and also get somebody to provide you feedback. Thank you very much for watching today. And if you're interested in other leadership videos, click on the 2 links below. Have a fantastic day.